What's up, Earthrockers? It's your boy Shovatar, back again to talk about another game. Check out this anime-ass opening, which I decided to record at a much higher resolution than it was ever meant to be viewed at, so it's going to be pretty pixely in places. Uh, this is pretty slick. I don't usually include opening cutscenes in these videos, or opening like pre-menu cutscenes in these videos, but I did it here just because I don't know, they put a lot of time and effort into this, and I just wanted to reward their efforts, I guess. I wanted to acknowledge the work that went into it. And it's okay if you don't know what's going on, although you can probably figure it out. There's our boy, Soma Cruz. He's back from the last game. He's fighting some bad guys. I read a little bit about the development of this game, and this opening was part of an overall strategy to make this game and to make the Castlevania series as a whole more like anime-like, because they wanted to appeal to a younger demographic. So as a crotchety old man, it's perhaps this game just isn't made for me, because I have a lot to say about Dawn of Sorrow, and most of what I have to say is not going to be very nice. So if you love this game, which some people do, this game was actually very highly critically regarded. If you like this game, you should brace yourself, because I have a lot of problems with Dawn of Sorrow. But before I talk about the game, I should actually talk about the struggles of recording a Nintendo DS emulator gameplay in the first place. And I should explain a little bit about why this video looks like this and like what I'm doing here. So as you know, or perhaps as you don't know, if you were born like 10 years ago, the Nintendo DS is a handheld console with two screens. You will only see one screen throughout the entirety of this video, because trying to record both screens at once in a 16:9 aspect ratio for YouTube simply doesn't work. If the default resolution for a YouTube video was perhaps 9:16 instead, and if my laptop was turned 90 degrees to the right or to the left, then perhaps I could include both screens. But the most practical solution to the two-screen problem was to use some emulation settings to only display the one screen, and then just record the one screen, because, as was often the case in DS games, the second screen in Dawn of Sorrow is totally superfluous. The only thing it shows is like stat information, things that are not essential information in the course of normal gameplay. In fact, I don't even know what it looks like most of the time, because I turned it off like as soon as I could to just show the actual gameplay screen. So this scene here, I talked a little bit about the story when I talked about Aria of Sorrow and how weird the story was. Dawn of Sorrow kind of blows it out of the water right at the start, with this utterly surreal sequence in which skeletons attack a street in Tokyo. I'm guessing it's Tokyo. I have no idea. I don't know what Japanese cities look like. I know he's in Japan. Well, this looks awfully spacious for a Japanese city, don't you think? So, I mean, I do kind of know what Japanese cities look like. Whatever. Point is, skeletons attack in the middle of the city by this evil lady who teleports around. This is kind of the place. This is like the moment when the impulse, the objectives that were laid out by Aria of Sorrow in terms of the story they wanted to create and the world that they wanted to build, I think hit a wall of credibility and of credibility, basically. What I'm saying there very delicately is that this opening sequence is completely ridiculous. I think it would have been neat if they leaned into it more, if the whole game was about skeletons invading a modern city. But unfortunately, this little intro is basically the game's way of explaining to the player what the plot is and what your basic abilities are. And this is just the way that they felt like they had to do it. This is the call to action, as they say, in narrative structure. And it's really weird. And I think that the whole Soma Cruise thing needed to end after Aria of Sorrow. The reason they made this game is because they really liked the Soul system and they wanted to do it again. So I think that was the... Well, I don't think that's what they said was the genesis for this whole idea, and then everything else kind of came after it, which is why I think the story is so weird. Um, and why it doesn't make any sense. And all the useless characters from Aria of Sorrow come back. Thank God. You wouldn't want to be without any of them. Fuck. I'm putting that in the thumbnail. Uh, the problem is that I have so many targets. It's like it's what they call a target-rich environment. I have so many things that I want to talk shit about that I don't even know where to go from here. I get this is kind of like the second of two opportunities that they had to incorporate the modern setting, the modern time period of the game into a larger, into like the Castlevania context. And again, they just didn't do it. Like the fact that this game takes place in 2030, whenever this is, 2036 or 37 or whatever. I think he said it in the opening text crawl, but I was too busy complaining to read it. Um, is not at all relevant to the gameplay. Again, like the most of this game is going to take place in what's essentially just a replica or something that's meant to be almost exactly like Dracula's castle. Um, However, now would be a good moment to mention one of the things about Dawn of Sorrow that I do like, because this is going to come up a lot, which is the Dawn of Sorrow has one of the best soundtracks since like Rondo of Blood, and I don't say that lightly. Rondo of Blood has like the best soundtrack in the game, but there are songs in Dawn of Sorrow that are really fucking good. Um, so it's been a long time since any of these games have risen to like Rondo level soundtracks since then. So I will give that as a positive. I also think that the gameplay, like at a baseline level, like the combat, is perfectly fine. It's like Aria of Sorrow, but it's identical to Aria of Sorrow. It just looks fancier. So it also kind of reaches Rondo level visuals also, at least in terms of the gameplay. Obviously, the actual art is a vast downgrade, but oh well. That's an interesting first thing to say to somebody after you haven't seen them for a year or two, but I give it a pass because it's very efficient dialogue. Um, because the most significant thing you need to know about Julius Belmont is that he's there to kill Soma if Soma ever becomes a bad guy. So that's just like the first thing he says to him, and then that's the end of it. This is actually a good moment to talk a little bit about a controversy that I wasn't aware of when I did my Aria of Sorrow video, or with any other videos actually prior to this. Maybe I mentioned it a little bit in Harmony of Dissonance, I don't really recall. But it's the way in which Igarashi, he's like the creative director, he's like the story guy for all the Castlevania games past Symphony of the Night. Um, Igarashi has been the subject of some criticism as to how he writes female characters. Normally this isn't the kind of thing that I would mention, but I think that uh, the way that Yoko acts more like a woman than any other female character I've ever seen in any of these games. And when I say acts like a woman, I guess it's hard to describe exactly what I mean, but you probably get what I'm talking about. Sort of like um, is very concerned and indecisive and emotional, and I mean she's very helpful too. But she has a couple of lines later on. Why does my fucking sorry guys, I fucking bumped my microphone again. My legs are in strange positions when I do these recordings. Anyway, the ways in which Igarashi writes female characters, because Yoko is established pretty definitively as a I mean, she's a Belnades, she's a Fernandez, so presumably on the same level as Sypha, or close to that in terms of competence and efficacy. But Julius just like leaves her behind and says, "Stay here because we need a contact in this area," which doesn't make any sense, and maybe made sense in the original Japanese. I don't know. But I just wanted to point that out because it is unusual. I don't really feel too strongly about it either way. But I did want to mention it because it was a controversy that I was unaware of. So here is the first cut of several, of many actually. I'm going to count them. Hang on a second, let me write this down. 1. Okay. That is the first cut of several, which I do to farm. One of my most prominent complaints about Aria of Sorrow was that there was farming in the game. Now, the farming in Aria of Sorrow compared to the farming in, say, Circle of the Moon, totally fine. Not totally fine because it exists at all, in my opinion, but very, very minor compared to Circle of the Moon. In Dawn of Sorrow, there's a particular system that's going to be explained in more depth later, or shortly, I should say. When I first played Dawn of Sorrow, I was going through the game, and I had this terrible problem with weapons, where I was like, I've had this same terrible weapon for like the entire the entire mid game, and I'm just not like doing any damage to anything, and fighting things is just taking forever. What's going on here? And then I learned about what this system was that I totally overlooked the first time around, which is that, and I'm going to explain what just happened with the magic seal later, but I want to explain the weapon thing first because I want to explain the farming. I learned that the way that there are some weapons available in the castle that are just always there, but the problem is that Dawn of Sorrow introduced a lot of different weapon types. In Aria of Sorrow, there are basically regular swords and then like overhand swing weapons, and then a couple of oddball stuff in between that. But in Dawn of Sorrow, they established like there are swords, there are big swords, there are spears, there are maces. There is a gun, although I don't think the gun is any good again. There was a gun in Aria of Sorrow, and it wasn't good there either. And each of these weapon types has its own sort of upgrade line, where you can talk to Yoko, and if you give her a certain soul that you get from the enemies that you fight, she can use that soul to upgrade your weapon. And that's how you get, like, good weapons at a consistent pace throughout the game. Because otherwise you're stuck with very limited options in terms of what weapons you want to use, and not all weapon types are created equal, in my opinion. There's rapier-type weapons, which I think are god-awful. There's, like, katana weapons, which sounds like they would be good, but they have this really, really annoying delay after you use them, where basically you're stuck to the floor after you swing for a long time. So, like, the only time you ever want to swing it is when you're jumping, which is annoying and kind of restrictive. There's problems with pretty much all the weapon types in Aria of Sorrow. I'm sorry, in Dawn of Sorrow. So the consequence of this is that you are incentivized to find a weapon type that you like the feel of, and then use the upgrade line that Yoko makes available to you. This is what they're talking about now. To upgrade that particular type of weapon into different weapons of that same type, until you get the ultimate weapon of that kind. So for this run, I'm going to be using two-handed swords the whole time, and I want to upgrade those two-handed swords pretty much as soon as I possibly can, so that way I can get the best possible weapon I can get at each stage of the game as soon as possible. The consequence of this is that if I want these souls in a civilized time frame, if I want these souls as soon as possible, I have to farm for them. I am going to do this many times. The thing about this is that it's very annoying because it's not technically required. I could, if I really wanted to, go through the whole game with shitty weapons. And the reason that I was farming shit at the start of the game there was for the Warg Soul. Now, if you have real sharp eyes, you might have noticed that the Warg Soul, that when I was in the little weapons synthesis menu there, I actually had 6 Warg Souls. So you might be wondering, Shovatar, if you were farming for a Warg Soul, why did you have 6 of them? Why didn't you just stop after you got 1? That's because at that point in the game, I always also farm for the Axe Armor Soul, while the Axe Armors are there, and that's just how I become accustomed to playing the game, is with the Axe Armor Soul, which basically serves functions like the Axe sub-weapon in the previous games. But for some reason, and the way that it usually goes is that the Axe Armor Soul drops, like, always drops before the Warg Soul does. But for some fucking reason, this time around, the Axe Armor Soul didn't drop until I'd farmed like 6 levels. It was fucking ridiculous. And this is exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about why farming is a terrible mechanic. Because there is no material difference between this run of the game and any other run of the game. But because I wanted the exact same tools that I had available to me in my previous runs, the game randomly decided to tack on this annoying busy work to give me the same tools that I had last time. Okay? There is no logical reason to not just give me the fucking Axe Armor Soul when I kill the Axe Armor. There's no logical reason to not just give me the fucking Warg Soul when I kill the Warg, okay? Like, if I want to use two-handed weapons, then that should be a decision that I make for a strategic purpose, not something that I just, like, do on the fly, because the way that the weapon upgrade system works more specifically is that there are, like, the base versions of each type of weapon are available in the first level. Like, the first mace you can get, the first spear you can get, the first two-handed sword you can get, etc. And I think that the intention is that you pick up all of them, and then you play through the game, and then whichever souls happen to drop, you take those souls back to Yoko to upgrade whatever type of weapon can be upgraded with that soul. Problem with that is the problem that I mentioned earlier, which is that some of these souls suck, or some of these weapon types suck, and in accordance with the player, with like a human being, like human beings have preferences and like to make decisions about things. So there will be a particular weapon type that you probably like the feel of more, and that is more useful to you, and that you enjoy using more. And so then, instead of just wanting to, like, wing it, and just randomly hope that the right souls that you need to upgrade the weapons in the right sequence drop exactly when you want them to, you're more likely to try to take the system into your own hands and farm for specific souls at specific times to get the best possible weapon that you want as soon as you want it. Because that's what a human being would do when presented with a problem that they want to overcome in a particular way. Okay? As opposed to just some kind of, like, mouse that you throw into a randomly swapping maze and just expect it to just do whatever when you put random walls in front of it. I am not a rat, okay? I am a person with a brain. And I do not appreciate being treated like something else. And that's what Dawn of Sorrow makes me feel like. Oh, there it drops. Thank God. I should also mention, well, I'll wait a little bit to talk about that. Because this is a modded version of the game. Sorry, I'm a filthy cheater. I installed a couple ROM hacks. I patched the game with a couple of ROM hacks, which I'm going to explain in more detail in a little bit, because it'll come up more then. So the weapon synthesis system that was introduced in Dawn of Sorrow is one of the worst ideas I've ever seen in my entire life in terms of, like, a video game system, because I mentioned in Aria of Sorrow that your weapon is your most important piece of equipment. It's what increases your damage, it's what... and damage is the thing that you want to do all the time. The number of times that you deal damage vastly outweighs the number of times that you take damage, and also the only way to deal damage is by using your weapon. You can avoid taking damage by either getting hit and having good armor or not getting hit at all. Therefore, the weapon is the most important item in the game. And for them to lock it behind this sequence of grinding is absolutely bewildering to me. So what would be worse than farming a couple souls to get the best ending in the game towards the very end? How about having to farm every single time you want a weapon upgrade? And let me ask you like a question. Why would I not want an upgraded weapon as soon as it was possibly available to me? What is the benefit of not doing that? There is no benefit. The incentive is to farm. If there's a particular enemy that drops a particular soul that you need for the upgrade line, then the incentive is to farm it as soon as it shows up. Okay? So it's not like you can say, oh, we'll just wait for a nat drop and see if it does. Why would I do that? Why would I do that? Why would I wait? It's like I'm playing a game designed on another planet, and I haven't felt like that since I played Circle of the Moon. Circle of the Moon and Dawn of Sorrow are very, very similar to me in a lot of ways. Also, there's more fucking talking in this game. And the storyline is just complete and total nonsense. I mean, it makes sense on a surface level, but it's one of those things that brings up... It's just so problematic. Yeah, I'm with Dario here. I've heard enough talking. It just takes the most confusing and problematic elements of Aria of Sorrow's plotline and decides to just put them under a microscope. And say, we're going to make the entire gameplay story about like this thing that was introduced in Aria of Sorrow that doesn't really make any sense. We're also going to ignore the fact that at the end of Aria of Sorrow, Soma Cruz destroys the source of evil darkness. But I will say this, I do think that this, if the intention with Dawn of Sorrow was to create like a larger storyline, and have the Castlevania series going forward be more focused on these particular ideas, this particular world that they were developing, then establishing that there are these Dark Lord candidates running around with Dracula powers, like Graham Jones from Aria of Sorrow, is a good idea, because it means that... I mean, I don't know what they mean when they say born at the same time as Dracula's death. I don't know if that means a day or a week or a month or a second or a minute, but because it's vague, it means that if you wanted to make like a I don't know, if you wanted to make a TV show about the adventures of Soma Cruz, you could just you could just keep inventing new people who were born on the same day Dracula died to show up and use evil magic powers. No reason to go to this save station. Thank you. Okay, the magic seal system is another terrible idea that was designed by somebody from another universe. The Nintendo DS has two screens. There's a regular screen and there's a touch screen. There's a little plastic pen that comes with the Nintendo DS called the stylus, and you can use the touch screen. You can use the stylus on the touch screen to like draw shit with it. In the course of normal, sane gameplay, this is always a bad idea. There's a couple exceptions. Kirby Canvas Curse is okay. But Castlevania combat, Castlevania gameplay, is very much about like moving and attacking at the same time, which means that you need to use all the buttons for that. You need to have both hands on the buttons. However, Dawn of Sorrow saw fit to include a mechanic by which every time you kill a boss, you have to draw a shape with the stylus on the touch screen. So you got both hands on the DS, right? You're jumping, you're fighting, you're playing the actual game. You defeat the boss, and then the game says, congratulations, but actually before you actually kill it, I need you to stop what you're doing and take out the stylus and draw a shape on the screen, and if you fuck it up, you don't kill the boss. As anyone who's ever, like, tried to do anything involving the Nintendo DS stylus under pressure will already know, this is just baffling. And Igarashi said in interviews that when they started developing this game for the DS, they couldn't figure out how to implement the touchscreen because of the way Castlevania gameplay works. So they just did that because they didn't have any real ideas. Because you can't have any because it doesn't work. Incorporating the stylus into Castlevania gameplay does not. You can't do it. It doesn't make any sense. This was a problem with the DS in with a lot of franchises. Kirby could adapt to it. A lot of other series struggled to incorporate this fucking bizarre gimmick that Nintendo insisted on. But what do I know, right? Because the Nintendo DS was the best-selling handheld console of all time, so apparently that fucking bizarre gimmick was a big selling point for people. Whew. I like the music in this zone. Like I said, the music in Dawn of Sorrow is really good. So that's one of the two ROM hacks that I established, was one that just auto completes the magic seal. So that way I didn't have to stop playing the game to try to use my touchpad to draw a fucking triangle or something on the screen. Instead, the boss just dies when I kill it, which is what is supposed to happen in any sane world. Same with these ice blocks. These ice blocks are only supposed to be destructible with the stylus and with the touchscreen. But again, why would I ever? Why would I ever? The other of the two ROM hacks that I installed was one that increases the drop rate of everything, but in kind of an oblique way. There's a luck stat in Dawn of Sorrow, but in the actual calculations, in the way the game calculates drop rates, the luck stat seems to do almost nothing. The ROM hack that I installed buffs luck so that luck actually has a noticeable impact on the rate at which things drop. So it serves as basically a baseline buff to all drop rates, which I was hoping I would find a ROM hack that just made souls drop 100% of the time. That would be hard to implement, though, because of the fact that souls, you can have multiple souls. I mean, that basically every time you killed an enemy, they would drop a soul, which would get really annoying. So, unfortunately, I basically wanted I basically wanted a ROM hack that would mean that I wouldn't have to farm at all, but I couldn't find one. All I could find was one that is supposed to make the farming not as bad, but as you can see with the axe armor problem, does not always, is inconsistent by its very nature. When it really would have made much more sense to just fucking give me the soul when I kill the enemy. Like, why are you wasting my fucking time? That's a thing that I found myself saying constantly as I was playing Dawn of Sorrow. And, as if that's not enough, this run is not 100% map completion. There's a couple reasons for that. The overarching reason is that I fucking hate this game. Or I hate the base mode of it. The Julius mode for this game is a totally different story, but I'm not going to talk too much about that. So for now, I'll just say, main reason I'm not 100% map completing it, I fucking hate this game. Second reason, the first time I really considered skipping the 100% map completion thing that I usually like to do with these games, is, there are certain doors in this game that when I first found them, I didn't know how to open them. There are these doors with like these numbers on them, like a slot machine, and it's like you'd hit the door, and then it would do like a slot machine thing, and then like these numbers would pop up. And I'm like, okay, wait, is this some kind of like fucking RNG shit, where like you have to keep hitting the door until it like hits 3 sevens, and then that lets you through? Or like, what the fuck is happening here? There are certain doors in this game that can only be opened if your money count matches the last 3 digits of your money, matches the last 3 digits that are present on the door. Let me ask you all a question. And think about this, right? Have you ever heard of a worse idea in your entire life than that? Oh, you can't get through this door? Go find some, like, candles and torches that drop money in the proper increments you need, and then come back with exactly that amount of money, and then you'll open the door. Oh, but don't accidentally pick up any more money in the meantime, because then that'll fuck up the last 3 digits and you'll have to do it over again. Like, are you mad? Are you out of your fucking mind? As soon as I saw that shit, I'm like, fuck this game. I'm not going for 100% map completion. I don't give a single fuck what's behind those doors. I know it's not energy tanks, because they got rid of energy tanks in Ario Sorrow and they didn't bring them back here. So whatever's behind those doors, I have no incentive to actually get. So instead of the soul system, which is the game asking me to waste a bunch of my time doing tedious shit to get something I want, now it's asking me to waste a bunch of my time doing tedious shit to get something that I don't want. Which is whatever garbage is behind those fucking stupid meme doors. I don't even know. I don't even care. It couldn't... I could not care. And there's a pretty significant section of the game. Not a significant section. There's a like a hidden part of the wizardry lab. That is only accessible if you get a certain soul, and I told myself that if the soul doesn't nat drop, I'm not doing it. I'm skipping it. And if you have a problem with that, blame the developers. They shouldn't have locked that part of the game behind farming a specific soul. They shouldn't lock anything behind farming a specific soul. Like, what was so bad about just putting the weapons in the castle? And I know what you're going to say. But Shovatar, they had all these different kinds of weapons. They can't put, like, I mean, like, there's fucking, like, 50 weapons in this game. They can't put 50 weapons in the castle. I agree. Cut all the useless crap. Cut the maces, cut the spears, cut the fucking rapiers. They're always shit because they have no range. Like, cut the fucking axes because they're too slow. Like... Okay, here's me pausing for farming number 2. Let me jot that down. I was going to jot down the times, too. I'll go back after this and I'll find the times, and I'll keep a running total. Because I don't know how much time exactly I spent farming, but I want to see how much it is. I know it's a gigantic chunk, but only because of something that happens at the very end. That being said, I love the way this zone looks. I think Dawn of Sorrow looks great and sounds great. Like, the best looking game, like I said, since Rondo, in a lot of ways. Yeah, and that's the other wonderful thing, is that after you finish farming the souls, you have to warp back to the Snow Village and talk to Yoko to actually get the upgrades. I forgot about that line. Yeah, this is a real anime ass conversation right here. Maybe I should talk a little bit more in depth about the story and about... Actually, you know what? This would be a great time to talk about why I picked two-handed weapons, because a point that I made in my Aria of Sorrow video was that I said basically that any weapon that was slower than the default, like, one-handed sword style of weapon that Soma starts with is useless and is a beginner's trap. So here I am in Dawn of Sorrow using the two-handers instead of the one-handers. So what's going on? The way that the two-hander... Well, the big thing that changed was that the two-handers in Dawn of Sorrow have a... have a longer horizontal range than the two-handers in Aria of Sorrow. In Aria of Sorrow, the two-handers, like, this shouldn't even be possible, but they somehow have, like, a shorter range than the one-handers, which makes them useless. But the two-handers in Dawn of Sorrow have a much longer range than the one-handers, which makes them useful. Because there's a thing you can do, you've already seen me do it a lot, but I should explain what it actually is. There's a thing you can do where, because the slow swing time is a concern, right? But there's a thing you can do where after your attack lands, you can backdash and then instantly attack again to circumvent the fuck, I fucking jerked my microphone around again. To circumvent the cooldown and to increase the rate at which you attack. So I'm going to be doing that a lot in this run. Oh yeah, that's all that shit from farming axe armors. God, what a fucking shit show. And you might wonder, well, Shovatar, maybe all having all these different kinds of weapons in the game is to give you different options in different situations, right? To which I'd say, that's true, but now if you want to maintain, if you want these weapons that you want for these different situations to actually do any damage, now you need to farm a second set of souls in order to upgrade these weapons. So now you've doubled the farming that you have to do. And I know what some of you have been screaming at me for the past 30 minutes about, which is, Shovatar, you fucking whiny asshole. Why not just play New Game Plus? Because in New Game Plus in this game, as in New Game Plus in Aria of Sorrow, New Game Plus lets you restart the game with all the souls and with all the weapons that you've already acquired, right? So why not just play the game once, get all this shit that you want, and then play through the game normally in New Game Plus. Because that's not the game. That's not the game that starts when you hit Start Game. And does it really feel like normal to you that I would have to go through the entire game already with the Claim Solus, which is the best two-handed weapon in the game? Does it make sense to you that I would go through the entire game with the Valmon Way, which is the best one-handed sword in the game? Is that how Castlevania games work? No. I mean, it is, in terms of classic Castlevania games. There's no weapon upgrades in classic Castlevania, but I don't know, doesn't that just feel wrong to do that? I mean, imagine how much fucking... I have to put so much parenthetical shit after these videos already. Like, if I would upload a video that's like Dawn of Sorrow, parenthetical New Game Plus, parenthetical Hard Mode, parenthetical ROM hack, no one wants to watch that shit. I'd have so much... it would just take so much more explaining. I mean, I'm already explaining it, but... I think something in me just rebelled at the concept. I concede that if you were going to play the game through multiple times, that would be the smart thing to do. But I mean, but that fucks up the balance of the game though, because the Claim Solus does holy damage, and there's so many things that are weak to holy damage in this game. So starting off the game with the Claim Solus would fuck up like the balance. Starting off the game with all the souls would fuck up the balance. So, like, I shouldn't have to do that. I shouldn't have to do a bunch of convoluted shit to make the game, like, playable. Do you know what I mean? That's funny. I also noticed that Dmitry Bilnov and Dario Bossi have the same initials, but I don't know if that's supposed to mean anything or not. Because Graham Jones and Soma Cruz have different initials, and I guess they're the same kind of, like, Dracula-adjacent dudes. Although Soma is different, because Soma was born in 2000 and... what would it be? 2017? Right? Because he's 18 in 2035. This fight is really interesting. This is a good, this is an interesting boss fight. I think it's a little bit too easy, but I think it's at an appropriate level of difficulty for this point in the game. Basically, Dmitry will copy whatever you hit him with first. If you hit him with some sub-weapon with some spell, he'll copy that spell. And that pretty much lets you dictate what he's going to do, and react to it appropriately. And I hit him with the axe there just because the solution to not getting hit with the axe is just close distance with him. And he tends to just back up and try to keep throwing it. He actually does have a melee attack where he'll like whip out a knife and slash at you with it, but he usually doesn't use it. I don't really know what determines his behavior, but he usually just backs up and tries to throw more axes at you instead of using the knife attack. Mysterious. That ring up there is attainable with the double jump and the slow fall, but I don't remember what it does, but I'm pretty sure it's useless. Fuck, was that like a luck ring? Could I have like used that? Whatever. Because the thing is that the ROM hack buffed luck, but get this, it buffed luck by making it so that every point of luck increases drop chances by like 0.1%. And this isn't Circle the Moon, you have like triple digit stats. This is like your luck stat is going to be like 29. So, at like the end of the game, right? So an accessory that increases your luck by like 2 is only going to increase drop chances by like 0.2%. Which, I admit, if you're dealing with drop chances that are like single digit percentages, that's better than nothing, but why can't there just be an item in the game that says, fix all RNG bullshit and just gives me the fucking souls I want when I kill the fucking enemies? Right? I don't care about item drops. I don't care about, like, the armor that gets... That right there is why I use two-handed weapons. Because the most annoying thing in any Castlevania game, and almost every Castlevania game, are flying enemies. And the two-handed weapons have a longer horizontal range, and they have the overhand swing that the two-handed weapons in Aria of Sorrow had, which was what was supposed to be their big selling point. So, long range, overhand swing, this like technique you can do where it's like the backdash to cancel the last part of the swing animation to attack again immediately. All that stuff taken together is why I pick two-handed swords. I can never figure out if I'm at like the right distance from my microphone or not. I think I got pretty animated back there, and I think I started like yelling. Oh, I should talk about the witches again. Unfortunately, she wasn't there for very long. The witches in Aria of Sorrow looked like they were topless. The added graphical fidelity of Dawn of Sorrow makes it clear that they are not topless, but they are almost topless, which I think is appropriate. I mean, you wouldn't want to risk an R rating for this game. This garden zone is fucking weird. Because there's no boss in it, ever. There's a boss door, but there's no boss, which I'll explain later. Or which will become, the reason for that will become apparent later. I don't know, what, is that weird? Is it weird for a zone to not have every zone that doesn't have a boss feels weird to me. Oh, I know why. I think it's because I'm still subconsciously thinking of all of these different regions as like classic Castlevania levels. So when there's no boss at the end of these zones... Oh no, there is a boss in this zone. I totally forgot. Right, that's what I'm on my way to go do. I'm on my way to go fight a boss. I just don't... For some reason I don't... because I'm going to fight the other guy. I'm going to fight the redheaded dude. I guess for some reason those guys don't feel like boss fights to me. Even though they unquestionably are. I think it's because they don't drop boss orbs. I think that's why. Look at that big-ass slug. Look at it. The Treants actually drop a pretty useful soul. They drop the MP regeneration soul. Which I might have on, if the game would just fucking give it to me. I should say that as much as problematic as the farming in this game is, it does not have any equivalent to the Circle of the Moon issue of movement. Because in Circle of the Moon, the problem was not just the farming, it was the movement. The movement in Dawn of Sorrow is great. I still like the Harmony of Dissonance style movement where you can like zoom all over the place better, but this is fine. For what they're going for. For the less like hyperactive type movement, which is how I would describe Harmony of Dissonance's movement. I would say hyperactive. I'm trying as hard as I fucking can not to jiggle my microphone, but it just doesn't. Whatever. I also think it was an interesting they with these two guys, with Dario and Dimitri, they took the two types of Dracula powers, and they gave like one of them each. That is some shit that can happen sometimes. One of my biggest complaints with the later classic Castlevania games is that they took away a movement option which I thought was really useful in Rondo of Blood, which is the ability to attack in one direction in midair, and then while you're attacking, like, drift back in the other direction. Some games, especially like Chronicles, had a bad habit of where if you would attack in one direction in the air and then turn to the other direction, you would like turn around completely. But in Dawn of Sorrow, the fact that the two-handed weapons have this long animation means that you can start the animation going in one direction and then move to the other direction in mid-air to like finish your attack while drifting away from something, which is really, really important. In Aria of Sorrow, you could do the same thing, and that's like so important to be able to do that. It makes attacking in midair incentivized rather than de-incentivized, which is the way that it was in a lot of previous Castlevania games. But I already like kind of talked about that in my Aria of Sorrow video. Anyway, the concepts behind these two bosses. Dario gets like the fire attacks, because that's what Dracula does when you fight him. He shoots fire at you. And then Dimitri got... There's this concept that was introduced in Aria of Sorrow as like Dracula's special ability is what they call dominance, which is his ability to, I guess, get monsters to do what he says, or like utilize their powers. And that's an element of Dracula that Igarashi emphasizes really strongly in, I think, all of these post Symphony of the Night games. It doesn't come up in Circle of the Moon or Harmony of Dissonance so much, but like after Aria of Sorrow and onwards, the whole dominance thing gets pushed a lot. Which, I don't know. Dracula either shoots fireballs at you or turns into a big demon. He doesn't like fight you using the abilities of his underlings. So I don't know where that idea came from exactly. I mean, he probably could if he wanted to, but he doesn't. Right? Dracula teleports and shoots fireballs, and then he turns into a demon and he shoots like more fireballs at you. So, like monsters do what he says, but that's just because he's like strong. It's not because he's like absorbed all of their souls. Although that's what they tell you happens in Aria of Sorrow. I don't categorically disagree with the decision to try to elaborate on certain aspects of the universe and of the setting. I should just say the setting that were left unclear before. I don't think that the games have to be as simple as the storyline of Castlevania 1, right? I'm not opposed to complexity on principle. But the whole way that Aria of Sorrow was... Like I already said, Aria of Sorrow introduced some confusing elements, and the Dawn of Sorrow leaned into them like 100%. Basically full committed to them. Which I don't think was a great idea. For some reason Arakado's like yelling face like makes me like laugh every time. Because he's always so like in Aria of Sorrow, the characters just have one portrait each, and then when he shows up here, he's like normal. Oh no, they don't have one portrait each in Aria of Sorrow. They have some different portraits, but he's always like calm, and then all of a sudden he shows up here and he's like screaming. I just think that's funny for some reason. Yeah, this is another thing about the the world that Dawn of Sorrow and Aria of Sorrow were creating that I have mixed feelings about, which is sort of the idea that Aracado is part of some organization of, I guess, demon fighters or like vampire fight, an organization dedicated to controlling and responding to the supernatural threats to the world, which is an interesting idea. But, and I already kind of said this in my Aria of Sorrow video, but I'm just going to say it again, but it does kind of beg the question of how common things like this actually are. It's the question that the games struggle to definitively answer, which is, are there dark supernatural threats beyond Dracula, or is it just like a Dracula thing? Because Dawn of Sorrow would suggest that anybody with a cult and with dark powers can just summon demons and monsters and start fucking things up. I mean, Celia is not established to be a Dracula dude the way that Dario and Dimitri are. She's just some lady who has like magic powers and can summon demons from the abyss somehow. Arguably more impressive powers than either Dimitri or Dario have. I mean, maybe I'm overthinking this, but again, they're the ones who decided to make the story more complicated. And if you're going to make the story more complicated, you're going to introduce more story elements, then that means I have to exert some brain power in order to comprehend them and to synthesize them with the other information that I've been given before. The games in the Metroidvanias got progressively raunchy. Why am I... Just stop. It doesn't matter. Oh, I should actually talk about what this room is. This is another reason why I didn't go for 100% map completion, because if I wanted to do that, I would have to do an annoying ass... There's like 16 rooms in this little area, and you have to do like a sliding block puzzle pretty much to make different rooms in this connective area available to you. So I would have to do that over and over again if I wanted to explore all the rooms and get 100% map completion. And I do not care. I do not turn on Castlevania games to play sliding block puzzles. Ever, 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 ever. Extremely tedious. Like, there's some armor available, I think, that if you do that might be a little bit better than what I have now, but I don't give a shit. It's about... I like that. It's about what are you asking me to do versus what are you going to reward me with if I do it. Right? Shit. This room is a great example of something that's I mean, I mostly only came here because this room is interesting. It's like it's a neat concept, and I wanted to show it off because I thought it was kind of cool. But there's nothing up here really that's worth going through all that shit for. Yeah, trying to create. I'm trying to. There we go. Yeah, trying to. The ROM hack that I installed that lets you break these blocks with weapons instead of the stylus means that the fact that I'm using two-handed weapons can make it kind of hard to establish, hard to create workable pathways through them. The war fatigues that I got are useless. Not useless. If I was a little bit more, if I was more concerned with offense than defense, I would put them on because they don't have as strong. They increase attack, but they don't increase defense by as much as whatever I have now. Which actually turned out to be useful for the boss rush. But I might actually commentate the boss rush footage, because the boss rush in this game is actually interesting, and the bosses in this game are actually kind of interesting. And I think I'm going to go... This is going to be the third farming cut, because the Lilith enemies are what give me the next weapon upgrade. And it's a pretty important one, because the next weapon upgrade after this one buffs all your stats. Not just attack. Okay, so that was actually a pretty merciful It's actually a pretty merciful little farming session. That was only about 35 seconds. I went back and I marked down all the times. Total time spent farming as of this point in the run is 15 minutes and 35 seconds, so that's not so bad, you know. You can compare that to fucking Circle the Moon. That actually might be in line with the total amount of time I spent farming in Aria of Sorrow, but only because of the gargoyle farm. Anyway. Yes, like I mentioned, that soul is particularly important to get because the next weapon upgrade is a weapon that buffs all my stats. And this is actually a pretty strange spot in the weapon upgrade line because it's hard to describe, but usually the way that the weapon upgrade system works is that every weapon upgrade is an upgrade. But for the two-handed sword line, the weapon that is next in the synthesis line right after this one is, like, worse for some reason, and I don't know why. So you have to get the soul for the next sword, and then the soul for the sword after that sword, and then you can get an upgrade. For some reason, the sword right after this one is a downgrade, and I don't know why. Yeah, this is what I mean when I say that she acts like a woman, by the way. This is not very professional behavior. And this 18-year-old kid now has to explain to this 28-year-old woman about the facts of life and the differences between the sexes. I assume she's 20-something, although the way that the Japanese media works, she could be like 19, I don't know. She could be 16, I have no idea. Okay, she's not 16, she's definitely older than he is, but... And I never quite finished my thought about the whole Igarashi writing female characters thing. This was a controversy, like I said, that I wasn't even aware of for a long time. But this is something that people have mentioned to Igarashi before, and what he said about it was something along the lines of, well, you know, if you look at classical vampire literature, female characters don't usually have much agency. They're usually victims in those stories. So it's usually a story more about men fighting other men, which is not a very good explanation, I think. I get what he means. I think what he says is that it feels strange for the genre and for the in his opinion, this is his opinion. I'm not saying I agree with him on this. What he's saying is that in his view, it's strange, given the genre and given the type of story that this is, for women to take a more active role in the narrative. I, of course, completely disagree. I don't think it makes a single lick of difference. And in a way, because in the Julius mode of this game, where you play as Julius, you don't just play as Julius, you can play as Yoko too. So it's not like she doesn't do anything the whole game. And I'm pretty sure there's a playable, I think in Portrait of Ruin you can swap between a dude and a gal. So maybe and obviously Order of Ecclesia, which I haven't played, but I do know the protagonist is female. So at some point, I guess that changed, but hey, the franchise died right afterwards, so what does that tell you? Ha 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 ha. Those fucking enemies are so annoying to fight. Even with the two-hander, like, they're fucking impossible to fight with a one-handed weapon, but even with a big overhand swing two-hander, they're so obnoxious to fight. Ah. This boss is very interesting. It's a fucking weird boss in the first place, and this zone kind of consolidates the Tower of Dolls concept and the ladies area concept that was present in Aria of Sorrow. It's not quite as, they didn't like have a designated women's area. I mean, that's kind of what this place is supposed to be, but it's not as it's not as single concept as that. In Aria of Sorrow, the demon guest house is like there's nothing but female enemies. Here it's like there's female enemies, and then there's also like clowns, and there's a big evil puppet monster. Like I said, pulling multiple duties instead of just doing one thing. I don't really like the whole evil puppet trope. I think it's kind of not interesting, and I don't really like the way they look. I also don't really think that the killer clowns, I don't like the whole evil clown trope either, because I think it's just kind of boring. I mean, it's okay if it's the Joker, but the Joker is a different kind of character in a different kind of setting. All that to say that this is my least favorite zone in the whole game. It also has a problem that the Demon Guest House had in Aria of Sorrow, which is that the music is boring as shit. Dawn of Sorrow has a good soundtrack, but this is a serious dud. And this is just a personal taste thing, because I get that it's supposed to be environmental and calm and I don't know, I guess idiosyncratic, perhaps? But I like my music to be more like, why am I going back and killing this guy? Oh, there's a certain point later in the game where I'm going to need the killer clown soul. I wonder if I'm going to farm it right now. Or if I'm going to go back and... what am I doing? This is very strange. Because I would expect to go back to the warp room. But the warp room was back up there. I don't know what I'm doing down here. I think I may have forgotten where the warp room was. This is very odd. Well, I guess I'll find out. This is... Where the fuck am I going? I guess I'm just taking the long way down. Because what I should be doing here, what I would do here normally is I take the warp room back to the chapel, because that's where I need to go next. To get to the condemned tower and then the clock tower. But here I'm not doing that, and I don't know why. Yeah, the reason that I think I already mentioned, I mentioned the backdash to cancel the cooldown, but the reason that I jump whenever I use two-handed weapons is because you have, you can control your horizontal position in midair. I think I may have already said that, but I just wanted to reiterate that if you're wondering why I'm, like, jumping all the time. Interesting, so I am going the long way around. I wonder if I forgot? This is very strange. Maybe I just wanted to kind of show more of the map. I really don't know what's going on here. Because there's a lot of the map that I'm not going to show you guys. I consider that to be partially my fault and partially just the fault of the game. The game made it less appealing than ever to go for 100% map completion. It's something that I've done and said before in previous videos about these Egovanias. Is like with Circle the Moon or with Aria of Sorrow, I'll say things like, well, the game is really fun, but it's more fun if you don't go for 100% map completion, but, you know, I had to do it, so I had to do all this shit that wasn't fun. And I think with Dawn of Sorrow, I just said to myself, why would I take... whatever. With Dawn of Sorrow, I just said to myself, well, fuck it. If going for 100% map completion isn't fun, and it doesn't seem like the kind of thing I would enjoy, I'm just not gonna fucking do it. You know? So this is the consequence. Oh, this is actually kind of a miserable farming section coming up here. I have to farm the Tombstone Soul, because the Clock Tower... I'm going to go to the Condemned Tower, then I'm going to go right to the Clock Tower, which is actually one of the few route splits in Dawn of Sorrow, where, like, I could be going to two different places here. I could go straight to the Condemned Tower, or I could go down into the caverns. The caverns in Dawn of Sorrow, as in other games... As in Symphony of the Night, there's like a cavern zone, and then there's like a zone underneath the cavern zone. And as in Symphony of the Night, I prefer to do the caverns and then the next zone beneath the caverns all in one go. If you wanted to, you could do the caverns here first, then go to the Condemned Tower, which might be advisable because the boss of the Condemned Tower is way harder than the boss in the caverns, and is arguably the most dangerous boss in the game, although I don't think it is, but it's definitely up there. But the reason I'm farming this Tombstone Soul is because in the Clock Tower, I'm going to have to write down a timestamp here. In the Clock Tower, it's the same as on Aria of Sorrow, where you have Medusa heads that petrify you, and then you have spikes. And that's... When in my Aria of Sorrow video, I talked about how that's sort of like the recipe for death, because getting petrified means you take double damage, and spikes will do, I think, like 71 or something in this game on normal mode. More on hard mode, but even on normal mode, which is what this game is. That's like 140, and it can just escalate super fast, and I just kind of want to make sure I'm as protected as possible, so I would put the tombstone... So I want the tombstone soul for the Medusa heads in the clock tower, and kind of for the boss in the condemned tower, but not really, because the boss in the condemned tower can petrify you, but it's probably not going to happen. The reason this is normal and not hard is because hard is only accessible via New Game Plus, and I already talked about why I don't care about New Game Plus. Like, they should have just made the game normal, you know? That's my opinion anyway. Hard mode in this game is actually kind of interesting. It actually changes... It's not just a numerical thing, it makes some of the bosses harder. Like, the death fight in hard mode, some of his attacks are more dangerous in hard mode than in normal mode. And I'd love to show you that, but they locked hard mode behind an alternate mode of the game that I don't care about, so sorry. Okay, I think this is when I'm going to start farming, right? I kind of went back and forth between how to farm this soul, and in retrospect, I probably should have skipped this, because... Yes, the Medusa heads in the clock tower are dangerous, but the spikes here are not doing mega damage, because it's normal mode. And there's not really that many rooms where you even encounter them. It's not like an Aria of Sorrow. In Aria of Sorrow, farming the Gargoyle Soul to make yourself immune to petrification was mandatory for 100% map completion, in my opinion, because there was a really dangerous room that was like nothing but Medusa heads that petrify you. And spikes. And the clock tower is not really like that. There's like a couple of rooms that are like that. I guess I just want it to be absolutely safe. I'm not farming it? Did I like farm it so seamlessly that I didn't even like notice? Oh, am I gonna farm multiple things here? Because that green dude with the halberd is a guy who I want to farm for the next soul upgrade. Okay, alright, you guys aren't gonna see it, but... oh god, that's really bad, actually. So what I do when I farm is I usually, because I don't know how long it's gonna take, I usually like will stop. I'll like stop recording. I'll mute the game, and then I'll like play something in the background because I don't know how long it's gonna take. That one was about 13 minutes. I didn't get the seconds down, but it was about 13 minutes of farming. I think that was for the Tombstone Soul and for the green dude with the Halberd Soul, probably. So I'd mute the game and I'd like play something in the background, but there, for some reason, when I started recording again, it was like showing stuff other than the game window. So I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna have to edit that out. Usually when I make these videos and I say I have to edit something out, I don't usually do it. I usually just kind of think about doing it out loud and then never get around to actually doing it. But for this, I'm actually gonna have to edit that out. So, oops. I didn't really see what it was, and I don't remember obviously like what exactly I was doing at this point in time. But it looked pretty embarrassing. So I should get rid of that. There's like a couple of frames of like there's like an OBS window and then there's like something else that I don't want to put on YouTube. Okay, that's actually really scary. I should see. This is why it's good to do commentaries for these things. So to make absolutely sure that I'm not accidentally doing shit like that. Oh man. Anyway, this part of the game is actually pretty dangerous if you're doing a no items run like I am, because there's just lots of dangerous enemies all in a row that are hard to fight consistently without taking absolutely zero damage. And there's no save station until the very top of the tower. The werewolf is dangerous. These things can kind of blindside you if you're not ready for them. The disc armor at the start is kind of dangerous. These guys, you have to fight them by crouching in front of them and doing this, but that's kind of the only safe way to fight them. So if you try to fight them in like a normal way, they just hit you, which I didn't get for a little while. The hunchbacks are back. Yeah, not better, unfortunately. Well, arguably, I mean, more attack versus less defense. Typically, I prefer more defense if I'm going to be playing like a full game run like this. Now we get to the first boss that like fucking hard filtered me in this game. This guy's a fucking monster. Like, this is the first boss in a long time that I felt like, how am I ever supposed to fight this guy? And he's a very like specific and, in my opinion, kind of unintuitive positioning check where you can see what the problem is immediately, probably just by looking at it, which is that you're fighting him in a fucking closet, and he's gigantic, and there's like barely any room to maneuver around. So he has a couple of attacks. For the laser attack, you have to get right up under him. You have to touch his body, basically. You have, like, visually, you're literally touching his big toe in order to dodge that attack, which is not the kind of thing that you would expect to be able to do without taking damage. But the real problematic attack is the jumping attack, which you guys already saw, and the way that you have to... I thought that attack was, like, fucking undodgeable for a long time, but it's just, you have to be so... There's just a very specific way that the game wants you to respond to it, which you have to like run towards him. Once you know he's doing it, you have to run towards him like preemptively. You can't because you can't crouch in front of him preemptively, or else he'll like bonk you with his foot. You have to like run forward and then slide kick under him at a very particular point at the peak of his jump, and that's really hard to get straight. This boss music's pretty fucking sick. Yeah, that boss is like fucking crazy. It didn't look that bad there, of course, but that was the result. Like the first, like I already said, the first time I got to that boss, I was like, this is bullshit. What the fuck is happening? Which I haven't thought that about a boss since like, oh man, I guess maybe Maxime was kind of like that. Like the Maxime's clone attack. But that was like a final boss. And that had a solution that was not a mechanical solution. It wasn't or I should say not a technical solution, where it's like you have to react in a certain way. Beating the Maxime fight is more just about having the right tools, so it's more like a puzzle solution. Gurgoth, the laser dinosaur. Fucking vicious. This is what I meant when I said that the that is not good, by the way, as I'm about to demonstrate, I think. Yeah, it's no Black Panther soul. The Black Panther soul is a soul from Aria of Sorrow, and actually it's in this game too. Where you like zoom fucking forward like a Dragon Ball Z character. And I was kind of hoping it would be a slightly like less high octane version of that, but it just seems kind of like a forward backdash. Which the problem with that is that the backdash in this game is on A, and the blue soul activation button is on, or I should say, the backdash is on L. It's A for me on a keyboard, and then the blue soul activation button is R. So that could be an awkward situation where you have to hit R to go left and L to go right. That can already kind of happen in this game, but if it's just the backdash, I feel like it's less confusing. Not kind of happen, that can happen in this game, that's just how the backdash is, but I feel like incorporating an ability that goes... It just seems like a complicating factor in gameplay that's not necessary. If I need to go forward, I can just go forward. So here I'm going to swing by and visit Yoko again to upgrade my weapons. this is what's frustrating about Dawn of Sorrow. There are things I like about it. I like the boss design. I like how vicious. I like how merciless it is. I just hate the I just hate a lot of the central mechanics. The shit that gets in the way of the actual combat and the actual gameplay. See, this is what I'm talking about. Like, who the fuck is this chick? Celia, I mean. I also appreciate, maybe this is another Igarashi women thing, but I appreciate that in the plot of this game he managed to shoehorn in not one but two stacked blondes. A good one and an evil one, which I also appreciate. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. You may have noticed that the first two-handed weapon upgrade was like bad, and now this one's good. This one doesn't buff all my stats the way that the Dainsleif did. Dainsleif. But it just does more damage. And it's going to be a while before I get another weapon upgrade. I think I'm not going to get another weapon upgrade until I get to the top floor, the pinnacle. So in between that, we have the clock tower, the caverns, the sub-caverns area, which is the Silenced Ruins, and then... I get my next upgrade. And I'm going to have a lot to say about the process of getting the last upgrades for this weapon, but I need time. I need time to mentally prepare myself for that. So, it's time for yet another clock tower level. I like to sort of do... I like to evaluate clock tower levels compared to other clock tower levels. Fuck you. The clock tower level in Dawn of Sorrow brings back... So it's something that was gone from Circle of the Moon and Harmony of Dissonance to a certain extent was like dangerous spikes. There were spikes in the Harmony of Dissonance clock tower and the Circle of the Moon clock tower, but I don't... That face is so funny to me. And then he fucking power walks away. Oh my god, that clipped my microphone so bad. Shit, I gotta back up. Holy fuck, sorry. Oh my god. Oh, Jesus. Yeah, as you can see, classic clock tower pendulums up on top of spikes. Whatever. I would say overall the Dawn of Sorrow clock tower is less dangerous than the Harmony and the Aria one, but that's partially a consequence of... Yeah, this is one of the rooms I'm talking about. Actually, you know what? Looking at this room and the way this shit is laid out, I'm glad I got the Tombstone Soul. Because that shit is fucking scary. That's like... Because that's not just getting petrified and happening to fall into spikes, it's getting petrified and then there are conveyor belts that pull you into spikes. So I've now changed my mind about that. And even if I'm taking 140 per spike tick, if you're on a fucking conveyor belt that's pushing you into spikes, that could tick more than once. That could be 280. You just never know, man. Like, I'm what? I'm like an hour and 30 minutes into the run. Why risk throwing it all the way for that? And like I said, it was only 13 minutes of farming, so that's not that bad. Right, guys? It's interesting that I went that direction, because I think I knew at this point that that wasn't the way to the actual boss of the zone. This is also another thing that makes the Dawn of Sorrow clock tower less dangerous to me in the Aria and Harmony ones, is just the way that I play Dawn of Sorrow is different, where I'm not going for 100% map completion, and I don't care at all about a lot of areas of the castle. Like, I don't feel as if I'm under any obligation to do anything in this zone other than get to the boss and kill it. And the game made it easy for me to think that by getting rid of energy tanks and heart containers. Heart containers, like it's Legend of Zelda. Heart missile expansions. Heart ammunition increases. I think the music for this clock tower level is better than the music for the clock tower level in Aria of Sorrow, though. The Aria clock tower music wasn't bad, but I think this is better. Jesus, that was close. Of course, no game has a better clock tower music than Symphony of the Night. The clock tower music in Symphony of the Night, I think it's called The Tragic Prince. It's actually like one of the best tracks in the entire fucking game. And it's such a shame that it's in a zone that's 100% optional. I feel like if you make a fucking banger track like that, you should put it in a zone that every player is guaranteed to be in. Another thing that I like about the soundtrack in this game, and I'm really noticing here, is that I think a lot of the songs have... I don't know if this is intentional, I hope it is, but I feel like they have beats that line up rhythm-wise with the pace of Soma's walk animation. Like, I felt like I noticed that a lot, like in the Pinnacle and here in the Clock Tower, where like Soma is walking and his steps are like in time with the song that's playing. I think that's really cool, and I hope that's intentional. I hope that's not just me confirmation bias. Or imagining that. This is my least favorite room in the game, I think. Least favorite, well, it's one of the more annoying rooms in the game. At least, I tell you what though, it's not the kind of thing that they used to do in these Castlevania games, which was make you do weird platforming shit while throwing gargoyles at you. I feel like if this was Dracula's Curse, I'd be doing this while gargoyles are coming at me from off the screen. Oh man, Dracula's Curse, what a game. That's where I am right now. I hate this game so much that I'm reminiscing about other games. I don't know. I don't hate this game. I don't think this game is worthless. I would probably almost recommend this game. Although I would do so with the caveat of if you're playing it on emulator, like, and you don't want to draw rectangles, you don't want to draw an octagon with your mouse in the middle of gameplay, then get a ROM hack that gets rid of all that ridiculous shit. I also don't really know entirely how the magic seal system works. I don't know if there's a time limit or not. I don't know if it's like, if it's just a case of like if you fuck up the shape, you don't kill the boss, or if you don't draw the shape in time, you don't kill the boss. I'm remembering, because I played Phantom Hourglass on DS, and the final boss of Phantom Hourglass had a... Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass had a mechanic like that, where it's like you have to draw a shape on the screen in a certain span of time. Phantom Hourglass incorporated the stylus into gameplay more, so it wasn't quite as strange, but it was still very, like, awful, and not something I think that belongs in a video game. What am I doing? Oh, right, this is my terrible Zephyr fight. So, this is bad. This fucking game is so shit. So, usually when I fight this boss, I have the Sniper Soul, which is from the floating archer things with the angel wings in the chapel. And I had gotten used to this fight and the way the Sniper Soul works is that it's a bullet soul. You activate it, and then, like, a dude with a bow and arrow spawns, and then you, there's, like, a delay, and then he shoots an arrow. And I had gotten accustomed to playing this game based off of, like, the rhythm of the Sniper Soul, and I thought I could, but here I didn't have it. I didn't know I didn't have it, so I substituted the Killer Clown Soul instead, because I'm like, hey, it's a, it's a projectile soul with infinite range like the Sniper Soul, how bad could it be? But the fact that I'm not using the Sniper Soul has, like, just completely fucked up my timing on the fight, and as a consequence, I almost die. And it's hard for me to explain rationally why it was such a problem. It's more of like a experiential thing, like physically playing the game. But it was just, I had just become accustomed to playing it in a certain way, and the fact that I didn't have the tools that I was used to having fucked me up in a way I wasn't expecting. Because, like, there's a rhythm to that fight where it was like, you have to do a lot of waiting in the Zephyr fight. Normally I really don't like waiting. I don't really mind it. The one context in which I don't mind waiting so much is in the context of a boss fight, because as long as it's civilized, as long as you're not, like, standing there staring into space for, like, 30 seconds at a time. If it's civilized waiting, then I don't mind it, because that makes it feel more like you're making a strategic decision. With the Zephyr fight, though, you can't. And what you're supposed to do with the Zephyr fight a lot is because his attacks are so dangerous. You do have to do. It's intelligent to do some waiting, and like see what he does. Wait until he does something, and then attack him basically while he's attacking you, or immediately after he finishes attacking you. Because so many of his attacks are so fast, that's just the smart thing to do. But sometimes Zephyr can just be a gigantic asshole, and he'll just, like, walk towards you, and he won't fucking do anything for long periods of time. And that can put you in these annoying no-win situations where if you're too close to a wall, then you can be... Or, like, he keeps walking towards you, and you don't want to jump over him because he might do his jump in the air attack at any second, but, like, he keeps walking towards you. And if you wait too long and you just let him corner you up against the wall, then if he does any attack, he's going to hit you because you're not going to have the buffer of distance you need to avoid him. So it's just like this awful, obnoxious, no-win situation that the game can sometimes put you in. But that's not what happened there. There I just fucked up because I just didn't have, like, my mojo wasn't aligned or whatever. I can't really explain it any other way than that. Here we are in the caverns. How do I feel about the caverns music? I think this is kind of boring. I think the caverns music is usually boring, but I think that the caverns music in Symphony of the Night had a nice little melody to it partway through that was interesting. Most of the caverns music in Symphony of the Night is also not interesting in my opinion. Oh boy, it's this boss fight. So I said it before that the boss fights in this game are interestingly designed. I would list this dude as the big exception to that. This is kind of a boring boss because water combat is always terrible. Water movement is usually bad, and then water combat is even worse because it has all the problems of water movement, and then it punishes you for fucking it up by making you take damage. But it's something that is it's like this weird... I don't know, do video games still do this? Do video games still have, like, water sections where you can't move the way that you could move in the rest of the game? Or did they finally get phased out at some point? I don't know. I don't really play new video games very much. In fact, I'm of the opinion that any game made after 2010 is probably not worth playing. But as you can see, this fight is just not very interesting. You just sit there and then you wait for him to pop his head up. This is an example of too much waiting, by the way. I talked about waiting in boss fights. This is not interesting waiting. This is I'm spending half the fight fucking waiting for this fucking shithead to peek his head above water so I can just fucking hit him. And you may notice that the thing is made ice platforms. If you have sharp eyes, you might have noticed like ice platforms at the edge of the screen. But I can't think of any reason at all not to just play the fight exactly the way that I'm playing it right now. What a fucking snore fest. Thank God. That is one benefit of doing the Condemned Tower and the Clock Tower before you go down into the caverns, is that this fucking boring boss fight is over faster. And this is also really good. I will give Dawn of Sorrow credit where credit is due. One of the more annoying things about Aria of Sorrow was the fact that there was water movement in that game, and then in order to facilitate water movement, there were not one, but two yellow souls that are related to water movement. There's one to let you walk on top of water, and then one to let you walk underwater. And the game, more often than I think it should have, would ask you to put on one or the other in the game's water sections, which is just like more annoying menuing. It's just not fun. In Dawn of Sorrow, they realized that, and they decided to make the walk underwater soul permanently active and just make it one soul that you get after a terrible boss fight. So, that's what's happening here. Actually, I'm going to go a little bit out of my way here just to get that piece of armor. Because the caverns in Dawn of Sorrow, as in Aria of Sorrow, is where I'm going to get the best piece of armor in the game that I think I'm going to wear the whole game. It's the exact same piece of armor. It's called the Eversing. would have been that is one thing I will say. The pros and cons of doing caverns before Condemned Tower. On the one hand, if you do Condemned Tower first, it's just cleaner and more convenient for the route, because then you can go straight from the because you need the Zephyr Soul to get to the Silenced Ruins at the bottom of the caverns. So if you do the 2 towers first, then you can go straight to the Silenced Ruins after the caverns. You don't have to do any like zooming around. And you get to kill the annoying, boring fish boss faster. But if you go to the caverns first, you can get Eversing before the Gurgoth fight. So I guess if I'm giving any advice to people who might try to play this game, if Gurgoth is kicking the shit out of you, which he is absolutely liable to do, maybe consider doing the caverns first, because as annoying as the fish boss is and as boring as it is, it's way less dangerous than Gurgoth. And I'm going to show you here how you can get Eversing as soon as you come down here. You don't need like the bat, you don't need anything other than the double jump, which of course you're going to have at that point in the game. This is another thing actually that's interesting. Again, credit where credit is due. This is an interesting impact that the weapon synthesis system has on the gameplay, which is that depending on the upgrade line of the weapon you prefer, it encourages you to go through one of these 2 routes, either the caverns first or the tower first. Because for the two-handed sword line, the way that it goes is it's the Lilith soul from the Demon Guest House, then the Dragazino soul from the Condemned Tower, that's the green dude with the halberd, and then the Gurgoth soul. And then you don't get any more upgrades until the last the second to last level in the game, the top floor. For the one-handed sword line, it's different. The one-handed sword line is the upgrade line at this point in the game is like Killer Clown, and then you can choose between one of 3 options for what sword you get after Killer Clown. But the one you should probably get is the Ice Brand, which is you get from the Frozen Shades in the caverns. So if you're going by like the weapon synthesis tree to decide which zone to go to next, the two-handed swords encourage you to go to the towers to go kill the Dragazino and go kill Gurgoth, but the one-handed sword line encourages you to go to the caverns as soon as possible so you can kill either the Frozen Shade or the Ukabak, which is that little green goblin dude. Or there's a third sword you can get from the one-handed sword line at that point in the tree. The one-handed sword upgrade line is the only one that has branching paths like that, as far as I know. There's like you can get Ice Brand, you can get Fire Brand, and then you can get like a weird beam sword that I think petrifies things, but that sounds like it's probably not going to work on bosses, so it's probably not any good. If you want to get one of the 2 real options, you would go down to the caverns to kill either the Frozen Shade or the little gremlin, and get the next sword in the upgrade line. So, to summarize that long, rambling digression, I think it's interesting that the weapon synthesis system encourages you to take different routes. That is the only nice thing about the synthesis system I am ever going to say ever again. Probably. I just wish that it was more based off of your actual decisions and not off of farming. What would have been cool is if you could, like, instead of having to farm specific souls, speaking of farming souls, I actually have to farm this soul anyway, because I mentioned that I need the Killer Clown soul. And I actually forgot when I mentioned that I already had it. It must have nat dropped and I just didn't notice. In order to get to a boss that... So there's a second boss in the Demon Guest House that you can only get to from the pinnacle, from the top floor of the castle. But in order to get to that boss, you need the Axe Armor Soul, and the Gremlin Soul, and the Killer Clown Soul. So actually that's another excuse for why I spent... how much time was it? 11 minutes and 53 seconds farming the Axe Armor Soul from the first hallway in the first level, is because I do actually need the Axe Armor Soul eventually, so... Yeah, fortunately I didn't have to cut for this, because one of the consequences of one of the benefits of that ROM hack I talked about that buffs luck is that The later you get in the game, there actually is kind of an impact, or feels like an impact to me between on drop chances of souls late game, which is exactly what you would expect given the way that that ROM hack is supposed to work. Early game, not much of a difference, but as the aforementioned 11 minutes and 53 seconds, I think demonstrates, but... And plus, I think that that little gremlin's soul has a high percentage chance to drop anyway. It seems to nat drop a lot for me. And actually, that gremlin soul is really important for fighting the boss that you need those 3 souls to get access to, but I'm gonna wait to talk about that until later. This is a lot like a room in the caverns in Aria of Sorrow, right down to the Eversing being behind a waterfall. Except this waterfall, miraculously, you don't have to farm. Equip the fucking Eversing. What are you doing? Are you serious? What's happening right now? I think maybe I've forgotten where to go. Equip the fucking, thank you. Amazingly, you don't have to farm a soul to get behind that waterfall. Can you fucking believe it? Like, this game loves making you farm souls, but you don't need to farm a soul to get behind the waterfall. I don't know why not. Isn't that more fun to lock exploration behind fucking soul farming? Like that shit right there? Like that fucking sea of spikes that I just showed you guys? So, that takes you to an underground laboratory part of the wizardry lab. It's pretty neat looking. There's like these fucked up monsters called homunculi on wires coming out of walls. There's like a pretty good piece of armor there called the Serenity Robe, but unfortunately it's worse than the Eversing, so it's totally redundant. But in order to get there, you need the Bone Arc Soul. And if it doesn't drop, then you would need to farm for it. And I'm not farming. Like, I'm not doing that. I'm just not going to farm. I'm not going to spend time farming for a soul that's going to get me nothing. Sorry. I'd love to show you guys that part of the zone, because the developers obviously put some time into it, and it's pretty interesting, but they locked it behind farming. So, sorry. That's what I need to enjoy Dawn of Sorrow. I need a ghoul soul. This isn't the best rendition of Vampire Killer I've ever heard, but it's a pretty good one. I'm talking about the music in this level right now. This is kind of a weird level because it's supposed to be an homage to other early Castlevania games, and in pursuit of that, they filled all the hallways with like bats and zombies. But bats and zombies are really not very dangerous at that stage in the game, so it creates a weird contradiction between the point of the game where you access this zone and the level of danger actually posed by the enemies. Ugh. Oh no. What's happening here? This is a really interesting example of something that I talked about before in my Aria of Sorrow video, and then I'm going to bring up again here very briefly, which is the way that later Castlevania games depict the Belmonts. Which is that, when I talked about Symphony of the Night, I'll make this as brief as I can because I've already talked about this. In Symphony of the Night, I talked about how in Symphony of the Night, Richter Belmont is depicted as sort of less competent than Alucard, kind of. Where like Richter is like possessed at the start of the game, and then after he gets rescued, he's like, oh, Alucard, I'm gonna sit here and be injured and let you go kill Dracula yourself. And I remember talking in my Symphony of the Night video commentary, I don't have a problem with that, but wondering if people did have a problem with that, or if they would have a problem with that if that were to happen today. Sort of establishing that the older, the established Belmont character is like weaker than this new character. Not that Alucard was a new character in Symphony of the Night, but he feels like a new character because he's so different from the Alucard in Dracula's Curse. And I said in Aria of Sorrow that I think when it came to the whole Julius Belmont thing, they really went out of their way to not make it sound like Soma Cruz was usurping the Belmont clan, or to make it sound like, oh, Julius is useless and Soma is just like better than him in every way. They did this in Aria of Sorrow by making the Julius boss fight really fucking hard. And then anyway, after the boss fight is over, establishing that Julius was maybe holding back anyway. And then in this game, it's the same thing, where Julius gets defeated by Dario in that little scene there, but only because he can't use magic seals the way Soma can. But this hasn't stopped him from defeating enemies that should have been indestructible before, because he's Julius Belmont, he's so badass, he actually didn't need magic seals to kill all those earlier enemies. So that's what I mean. This fucking boss fight can suck 100,000 dicks, by the way. This is not like the worst boss fight in the game, but holy shit is it annoying. It can put, it's kind of like the situation I was talking about with Zephyr, where if it makes certain decisions, like this is perfect. This is a great example of what I'm talking about. That hand shit, I don't know where exactly you have to be in order to get grabbed by that. And you can get put in the situation where you're up against a wall and the hand is coming at you, and you either have to hope that the hand dissipates before it reaches you or try to jump over it. And it's like if you don't make the positional, in what position it is, I can't tell when it's the right decision to do which of those two things. I can't tell when I should try to jump over it or when I should try to wait for it to phase out. Sometimes it's easy if it starts off across the room from you, but like I said, if you're in this position where you're up against the wall, and or like it's towards the middle of the room and you're up against one of the walls and it turns to the hand and it flies towards you, it's like I don't know what to do. Very, 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 very obnoxious. I don't like anything where the danger zone is not perfectly clear to me. Like, I don't know how close to the hand I have to be, or what part of the hand is the part that grabs me, if that makes any sense. But everything else about the fight is basically fine. It's just about getting the timing down for how long the thing, when it's in its normal bat form. It's about getting the timing down in terms of how long it stands still and like aims at you, when it aims at you, and when it finally lunges at you. And you have to figure out the timing to bait it to a certain spot and then jump over it preemptively. Basically start jumping over it before it lunges at you, which is hard, but it's just about learning the timing. Oh, this room is also pretty fucking dangerous, so yeah, now that I said the Tombstone Soul farm was unnecessary, but now that I'm actually watching this footage, I think I've changed my mind. I think it was the right call. I also want to point out here that we've had like a glorious 35 minutes of uninterrupted gameplay. I haven't had to farm anything for a really long time. If only this utopia could just continue forever. Because I tell you what, guys, it would really suck if I was about to run into an absolutely inexcusable gauntlet of farming pretty soon. That would be really bad. Okay, this is actually really interesting and really funny. So, that might look like Yoko over there. It's not. It's the succubus. The succubus in this game disguises itself as Yoko. And this is interesting to me because the succubus in Aria of Sorrow disguises itself as like a gal in a Shrine Maiden's outfit who's saying like, Tasukete, which is help me. So it's like, oh, that lady's in trouble, I'm gonna go help her. Turns out it's a succubus, and then she like comes out of the floor and attacks you. That's what happens in Aria of Sorrow. In Dawn of Sorrow, she's not disguising herself as like a lady who's in trouble, she's disguising herself as Yoko, which is like more thematically consistent, I guess. It's more about it's more about seduction, it's less about co-opting noble traits or noble impulses, but more about exploiting immoral ones, which makes sense. But it's interesting that it's Yoko. I guess it's just because, I mean, she's the most conventionally sexually attractive woman in the cast, and because I guess it's an excuse for her to get naked, which is kind of what happens there when you hit her the first time. She literally falls out of her clothes into the floor. I've said before in Aria of Sorrow that the games got progressively raunchier from like Symphony of the Night to Dawn of Sorrow, and then after that they kind of toned it down from what I've seen of some of the enemy designs. And again, I'm not actually offended by that. I mostly just think it's funny that they kind of like kept pushing to see how far they could go. And with Yoko in this game is kind of like the pinnacle of sleaziness. Where the fuck am I going? I actually have no idea what's happening here. Oh, I'm farming a bunch of shit at once. Oh, this is gonna be the nightmare. Yeah, check this out. What can you even say? That was... We went from... I have it written down here. We went from 2:05:45, I'm looking at the time played, to 4:15:04. That's a total of 2 hours, 9 minutes, and 19 seconds. So while this worthless conversation happens, I'm going to tabulate the results here. 153, 1535, 224. 2 hours, 24 minutes, and 54 seconds spent farming. To be fair, the farming I was doing for the first of the two upgrades there, the final sword, involves farming the final guard, which is an enemy that takes a long time to kill. And I did not have the Treant Soul, which I usually have for that farm, which lets you regenerate MP faster and which significantly speeds up the pace at which you can kill those enemies. However, you know, I didn't have the Treant Soul. I didn't have Ghost Dancer Soul past, I believe, 1. Because this is amazing, too. Not only does Dawn of Sorrow reward you for farming, but it rewards you for farming souls, like, repeatedly. Like, the Ghost Dancer Soul increases luck by, I don't know, like 2? But you can farm up to 9 Ghost Dancer Souls. To get even more luck, so that you can farm other things better. I feel like... I think I've probably already said this, but this is really... It really bears repeating at this point. So if you look at the history of Metroidvanias, Metroid-style Castlevania games, Circle the Moon comes out. Right, Circle the Moon was made by like a different division of Konami. But Circle the Moon comes out, right? And then when the Tokyo division takes over, and they make Harmony of Dissonance, they're like, wow, that Circle the Moon game was like really bad. Let's cut everything about Circle of the Moon that sucked, and keep everything that's good. And though the result is Harmony of Dissonance, a game with the best movement in the whole series, practically, and absolutely zero farming. So they identified the two biggest problems with Circle of the Moon, and they completely and totally extracted them. Then Dawn of Sorrow comes... So then you have Aria of Sorrow. And Aria of Sorrow is an excellent game. A very well-received game. Oh, this is my favorite room in the whole game, speaking of which. Yeah, this Dawn of Sorrow didn't lean as heavily into this being like the brothel zone, except for that room. Aria of Sorrow is a great game, but it has this annoying farming thing, where certain tools and certain attacks you might want are locked behind this random gauntlet. Not gauntlet, random drops. So it's like a great game except for that one thing. And in Dawn of Sorrow, for some fucking reason, they decided to take the absolute worst aspects of Aria of Sorrow and crank them up to 15. And I think, again, I think I may have already said this, but this... I really need to say it again at this point. This design is kind of unforgivable, in my opinion. Speaking of unforgivable design, and now it's time for the paranoia fight. If you're wondering what the healing is coming from, that was another soul that I farmed during that 2-hour gauntlet that I cut out, which is the creature soul. It passively regenerates your health. And because I'm so over-leveled, that first phase of paranoia doesn't do that much damage to me. Second phase of paranoia. This boss is a great example of something that I hadn't encountered in a while, which is the game being very bad at telling you what exactly is going on, because I think you could be forgiven for assuming during this paranoia fight, as I did when I first started playing it, that the mirror patterns were random. But it quickly becomes apparent that the mirror patterns are not random. In fact, he's aiming at you. Wherever you happen to be standing when the mirror phase starts, that's going to get hit by a laser one way or another. You don't exactly know what pattern he's going to do necessarily at the start of the fight, or at the start of the phase, but if you go through a mirror phase, you can't stand in the same spot twice. Whatever spot you were in the first time, you're going to get hit the second time. Ironically, the safest spot in the paranoia fight, a lot of the time, is behind or beneath one of the mirrors. Because lasers, the actual, range, the hitbox for the lasers, like the spot that actually hits you, is a lot smaller than it looks. So you can actually crouch, right inside the mirrors or, right next to the lasers and not get hit by them. But I didn't know that at the time. So it just seemed to me like this weird, random thing that that can just fuck you over sometimes no matter what. And I've since learned, through extensive experiences in the boss rush, that this is actually still true. It can still just randomly fuck you over, but you do have more control over what's going on than I think is immediately apparent. I also actually had to look up the fact that he telegraphs in what order the mirrors get hit, because the mirrors will light up, like 1, 2, 3, to show you what the path of a laser will be. So I think my problem with the paranoia fight is that if you want to execute it consistently, yes, it shows you all these things. It shows you where the arm is coming out of. It shows you what order the mirrors are going to get hit. But you're basically conveying a whole lot of information in not that much time and expecting the player to absorb it all. And I mean, my spatial reasoning skills are not superb, I will admit. But where am I going? I don't know why I'm going this way. Wait. Where am I? Oh, I know why I'm going this way. Yeah. The soul that I got from Paranoia lets you enter mirrors and get, hidden items. So I'm going back to the chapel to get an actually good accessory. The first new accessory I've gotten since the fucking chapel, by the way. Since my first time through the chapel, I should say. See, that's my problem with the Paranoia fight, is that it... yes, it conveys everything to you, but it does it in a really, really brief window of time, and the consequence of that is that you end up kind of, guessing. This spot is probably safe, so I'll just kind of go over here, and then, either you're right or you're wrong. And, like I said, I've since learned that you do have a good deal of control over that, over the mirror phases, but it took me a really long time to realize that. If I had just stopped playing this game, if I had never done the boss rush, I never would have learned that. Which is one reason why I'm kind of glad that I did do the boss rush, because putting yourself in a really punishing environment like that forces you to learn the fights and forces you to understand the game. But it also would have made more sense to do the boss rush before I recorded my final attempt of the main game, so that way I had knowledge of all the bosses. But it doesn't matter. At this point, the only thing that's really going to threaten me is... Actually, I think all the bosses can still kill me at this point, because Dawn of Sorrow maintains what Aria of Sorrow did, an actual good thing that Aria of Sorrow did, which is that Aria of Sorrow was very good about making the late game still feel threatening. This is mostly accomplished by just having bosses deal a ton of damage. All the endgame bosses are going to deal a fucking triple-digit damage on each hit, so you're not going to be able to get away with just tanking everything and out-damaging things. And, like, for all I know, like, there's overpowered soul combinations that maybe make all these bosses trivial. Maybe there's, like, some equivalent of the succubus. I mean, there is a succubus soul in this game, but I mean the old succubus soul from Aria of Sorrow, where if you hit, every time you hit something, you get healed. I don't know if there's some equivalent of that in this game. I don't know. I don't care. Because, like, I'm interested in accessories. Because, and, like, looking up where all the, like, what all the mirror accessories are. Because I can just go and get them. But every time I say to myself, I want this particular tool, I want this particular soul, now I have to go fucking farm for it, which just makes me not want to bother. Makes me more likely to just stick with whatever I have and not engage with this shit that's going to take, I don't know how much time, like, I don't even know how long to get, you know? And this is like, again, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but, and I feel like I've already made all these points already, but it bears repeating. That being said, I love the way this zone's background looks. This actually reminds me of Symphony of the Night. A lot of the graphical quality of Dawn of Sorrow kind of reminds me of Symphony of the Night, and kind of reminds me of Rondo. Obviously, the PC engine is not the same strength of console as the PS1, but I remember when I started playing Dawn of Sorrow thinking that it was like the best looking game since Rondo, and I think I've already said that too. Oh, I should point out something about the bat form, which is going to become apparent towards the late game. So when Soma turns into a bat, for some reason he does this really obnoxious like spin, like somersault in midair, and the reason that that's such a problem is that he will like... There's this delay between when you activate the bat form and when you swap into a bat, and during that time, like, your legs are flailing all over the place. So if you're trying to turn into a bat to dodge something, which is a common reason for turning into a bat, then you end up not dodging it because you're, like... You're busy, like, spazzing out in midair at the point where you think you're going to be turning into a bat to dodge an attack. So, very, very, very frustrating. So the weapon that I have now is the Claim Solus. It's the best two-handed sword in the game. I went out of my way to get it for the Paranoia fight and for these last stretch of boss fights. That's which is why Paranoia ended up dying so fast. That and like I just ended up farming a bunch of levels in the process of farming for the souls that I needed for the Claim Solus. So, like, the game basically fucked itself. It basically fucked its own difficulty curve by locking something that I wanted behind a really long grind. I think I'm gonna make a break here to, because there's two different endings associated with this room coming up here. This is the first, like, these are the first, ending differences. I like how cocky Soma is, because it makes sense. I mean, given the context, like given how much shit, how much shit Soma has done at this point, it makes sense that he would be overconfident. So now it's the Dario fight round 2, which I'm fairly sure, if memory serves, is almost the same as the first Dario fight, except that he when he shoots fireballs straight ahead, instead of shooting one, he'll shoot either that or he'll shoot 3 fireballs. So, and there's actually a faster way to... I could have done that even faster. I actually could have stun-locked him. And if you watch my boss rush footage that I'm going to upload after this, then you'll see what I'm talking about. But this still worked out okay. You got to see his big fancy attack. Damn, he exploded. I feel like it shouldn't still be playing this boss fight music, but oh well. We have units tracking her whereabouts now. Genya has this, like... He has this, like, nebulous organization working for him. With, like, units and, people, and it's like, is this some kind of, like, global intelligence agency in charge of dealing with Dracula shit? I think that's what the implication is, and maybe part of the fictional Dawn of Sorrow universe they were trying to build. Mysterious. Church capitalized. So there's the first ending. I hope I don't let the credits play out the whole time. Yes, thank God. Okay. The first of 3 endings. You kill Dario, the lady escapes. Very anticlimactic. It makes it very clear that you're supposed to do something else. I think I'm gonna skip this, yep. You actually can't skip this, like, with a button press. You actually do have to go through all the text. So here's the real boss at this point in the game, this huge, scary fucker, named Agony. One of the first time... This is, like, the first boss since Gurgoth that really gave me trouble. Well, Paranoia gave me trouble, but this is the exact reason why. That fucking claw attack, like... It took me so long to figure out how to dodge that, because I think my impulse was, I don't want to get cornered, so if he's coming towards me with his claws up, I should try to be running underneath his claws, like get out from under him before it hits me. But the problem with that is that when he swings his claws down, he's swinging them down and inward, like towards beneath himself. So if you try to go... If you try to go underneath him when he does that attack, he's like guaranteed to hit you every time. So what you have to do is you have to back up away from him like this. But the reason that's a problem is that, like, let's say he did that again right after he did it the first time, which he can do. I would be up against a wall and I wouldn't be able to move back. So what you're supposed to do is, like, if I'm up against the corner like this, I have to slide kick out from under him again in case he does the claw attack again. And that like downward slashing claw attack is really the thing that makes Agony a difficult boss. Everything else is not really that hard to deal with, but that is a real problem. And thanks in part, I'm sure, to Claim Solace, because Claim Solace does holy damage, which is pretty important. And I'd be very surprised if the giant fiery demon did not take extra damage from holy. There she is. Oh, but are there? That's true, it's not. He says, let's stop this stupid chase, and that, yeah, what the fuck? Ah. Mysterious. I like the little laugh that she does. Which is weird because she seems pretty, like, serious most of the time. She doesn't seem like a maniacal laughter kind of character. But I guess they decided to put that in anyway. Yeah, this whole castle setting is very odd because they basically, I think in universe the explanation is that the cult built a castle to basically look like Dracula's castle, right down to the clock tower and the throne room and the stairs going up to the throne room. So that's dedication. God damn it. There we go. Perfect. Yeah, the late game, once you have like your last weapon, once you have Claim Solace, and you don't have to worry about farming anymore, this last stretch of the game is actually pretty fun. The paranoia fight sucks, I'm gonna be honest. It's either you trivialize it by just having too much health, or you die to random nonsense. Or what I think any player, any normal player could be forgiven for assuming is random nonsense. Like I said, it took me a lot of a time with paranoia to figure out, yeah, fuck that. Oh no, I'm just gonna go over them, okay. Yeah, these are the guys that I had to farm for the final sword soul. And I think I'm just killing this one out of spite. Yeah. Yeah, I think the percent for the soul to drop is like 2 or something. That is an interesting little doohickey there. That apparently will create a spotlight that, if you activate it, will summon like a Mothman to come down. And I didn't bother undertaking all the steps that would have been necessary in order to accomplish that because I was really sick of this game. And I wanted it to be over, and I didn't feel like engaging with any of its crap. So, sorry. This is a very like non-comprehensive playthrough, and on the one hand I feel bad about that, but on the other hand, I think I need to show some. I need to respect myself. You know what I mean? I need to practice self-care, to a certain extent. Like there's, I only feel obligated to put up with so much, I guess is what I'm getting at. Like, I'm sure there's other things about this game that I don't know, that I don't know about, but you know what? I don't know if I've made this point so far. Fuck, maybe I did already. Fuck it, I'll just say it again. One of the things that I didn't like about Aria of Sorrow was that it got rid of the energy tanks and the missile expansions, which de-incentivized exploration. I know I've talked about that before, but there is another way to incentivize exploration in video games. And to give another Metroid example, one of my favorite things in video games ever is the scan visor from the Metroid Prime series, from Metroid Prime 1 and Prime 2. And what the scan visors do is, instead of rewarding you with items, they reward you with lore. They reward you with backstory and with information about what's going on. And I think it would have been nice. I think Dawn of Sorrow has enough story and enough like elements that clearly the creative team wants to be introduced, that it could have done something like that if it wanted to. There's actually a kind of something like that. There's like newspaper clippings you can get, but I think they're very vague. It's like brief snippets of text that aren't really about world building or lore implications. They're just about like how, like, I think it's hints to find certain enemies. Oh shit. Oh no. Oh shit. Cunning scheme. The power of chaos is gathering, and it's actually going to gather so hard that it's going to make the emulator lag. This is an interesting facet of the whole Dark Lord thing. So if all it takes, I was under the impression that in order for Soma to become the Dark Lord, something pretty remarkable had to happen, but it seems like if Soma just like gets pissed enough, he like becomes the Dark Lord. And I mean, obviously, like, watching your girlfriend die in front of you is a kind of a remarkable situation, but I mean, something could happen to him in his regular life that could make him that pissed, you know what I mean? I mean, what's the threshold? This is an interesting, yeah, they just tell you. This is, you know, this thing that Igarashi liked doing in Dawn of Sorrow, where you have to equip a certain item to get the certain ending. In Aria of Sorrows, you have to equip the right souls. In Harmony of Dissonance, you have to equip the rings. And here in Dawn of Sorrow, you just have to equip the talisman. So, I don't know. If they just literally tell you what to do, I guess it's as good a way as any of incorporating the different endings, because that ending with Soma actually has some interesting consequences, which is that when you unlock, that is what unlocks Julius mode, which is when you play through the game as Julius and his buddies, which is, in my opinion, the real game. Like, this shit, this like farm fest RPG shit in the main game of Dawn of Sorrow is just kind of like, it's something that you just like get through to get to unlock Julius mode, in my opinion. And then you play Julius mode and it's like, okay, good, this is like a real game. And in Julius mode, it's not just an alternate mode just for fun, it's an alternate mode with the assumption that the ending you just saw is the actual ending to Soma's adventure. Like, Soma becomes evil, and then Soma's actually the final boss of Julius mode, in a very, very interesting final boss fight. This is what's another thing that's weird about equipping the talisman, is that equipping the talisman doesn't even accomplish anything. Soma doesn't resist the dark power. Alucard just shows up and talks to him. So I don't get how the talisman did anything there. It seems more like it was Alucard's fault for not showing up earlier. And telling Soma that that he was being tricked. That he was being rused. So this is also kind of a weird little... Speaking of weird little things happening... oh shit, it's the guy from before, he's back. This is really fucking weird. So I guess the way that the doppelganger works is that it's just like a thing you can turn into other people, and then Dimitri put himself into the doppelganger's body, put his soul in the doppelganger's body and replaced it. So... that's a really weird line. I thought Dracula was the Dark Lord, and the Dark Lord's heir... So I guess okay. Actually, I guess what they mean is Soma is like the reincarnation of Dracula, but Dimitri and Dario are just like the dudes who were born at the same time Dracula died. So that's what he means. Yeah, there's some linguistic shit. There's some like problematic. There's some linguistic issues in Dawn of Sorrow with, like, they say Dark Lord candidate and then they say like Dracula's heir, and those two things in the context of the storyline seem to mean the same thing. But they're referring to slightly different iterations of this different incarnation of Dracula's power. Which, I don't know. Like I've said multiple times before now, if the point is to have bad guys in the game who aren't Dracula, I guess this is as good a way to do it as any, but it's just a confusing concept. And I feel like I've said this before too. So this is the problem with doing these long ass commentaries, is that the same things keep bothering me over and over again, and I feel the urge to talk about them over and over again. I'm caught in like a loop of history, just like the Castlevania series. Oh, another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to tabulate total game time at the end of the run, and then figure out what percentage of that game time was spent farming. Speaking of things that I keep bringing up over and over again. What would I do? What would I do if I had to come up with a Castlevania storyline that didn't involve Dracula. Well, for one thing, I was thinking about this the other day. You know, the fact that Aria of Sorrow takes place in 2035 is totally irrelevant. Because here's what you could do. Okay, they put it in 2035 to accommodate the 1999 thing, because they thought the 1999 Nostradamus' prophecy idea was cool. I get that, but no one cares about Nostradamus. I'm sorry to say. Like insane people do, but Nostradamus is not important enough to warrant defining the course of your entire fictional timeline. So my advice for Aria of Sorrow: axe the 1999 shit. Axe the 1999 shit. Establish that Dracula's actual death happened in the end of Symphony of the Night in 1797, and just set Aria of Sorrow in like the mid 1800s. You can keep the same like Dracula's resurrection, Dracula's powers going to people when he died shit as before, but now you don't have this like modern setting that doesn't seem to serve any purpose, or this weird 1999 non-event. Because what purpose does the modern setting actually serve? Other than, I guess, grounding... I mean, if it was like a marketing thing, like we need to make the series more relatable, we need to make it more easier for average people to understand, we need the protagonist to be a high school student, then that's what you have to do. But if that was what you were gonna do, again, I think you can cut the 1999 stuff from the game entirely. And I know what some of you are thinking. You need the 1999 stuff in there to justify Julius's presence, right? Because otherwise, like, how is Julius there? Who is Julius? Why is he important? Honestly. And you can't cut Julius, because Julius mode is really fun, and then the Julius boss fight is like the best boss fight in the whole series, right? So you can't cut Julius. What you could do, in my opinion, here's an idea. If the whole point is just to facilitate a boss fight, like a really cool boss fight, then it would make sense for the Belmonts in an era where there is no Dracula to be, I guess, searching for some kind of purpose. Like, it would make more sense to me for a post-Dracula Belmont to be like a boss fight, somebody who would like fight you. And the logic would be exactly the same. It's like, I sense Dracula's power inside of you. I'm a Belmont, it's my job to fight Dracula. Now I finally get to do, you know, what my ancestors did. I mean, why not? Like what difference does it make? And I realized, and I'm saying all this in the universe where the 1999 Castlevania game was never made. I understand that. So if I lived in the alternate universe where they did get to make that game, maybe I wouldn't be saying this, but I only live in the world that I live in, and in the world that I live in at the current moment, the 1999 thing doesn't seem to serve any purpose. Because you can't just say, here's a different vampire who's really powerful, right? You can't just introduce like a new vampire villain who has nothing to do with Dracula. I think I agree that would be a little bit weird. Or how about this? I mean, speaking of, let's draw inspiration from what's going on in the game right now. What about Death? Right? Like, Death is a pretty major villain who's consistent throughout the series, and it's established that he's immortal in a way that Dracula seemingly even isn't, right? Because he's the Grim Reaper, he's Death. Obviously, he will never die. So, I think you maybe could introduce a new villain if Death was sort of like the connective tissue between him and Dracula. I could see that working. Because I think Death is the bad guy in Curse of Darkness, right? So, like, why not? And you could still have, like, Dracula's, like, heirs running around if you want to do the whole soul power. Because that was the whole point of it. Like, it's not like they came up with the story first. They came up with the idea of, it would be cool to, like, use abilities from monsters that you kill to use like soul powers. That thing there, that's so frustrating. Because there's a timing where when he teleports in phase 2 and then slices you, there's a timing you can duck underneath the first slice, hit him, then jump and hit him again. But the timing is really tight, and there I just kind of fucked it up. What's smarter to do, that attack is so weird, because what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to crouch under it. But if you stay crouching after he finishes the attack, he'll actually attack you again. And all he's checking to see is if you're crouching. If you crouch, dodge the first swing, and then immediately stand up, he won't swing again. I thought, until I went and did the boss rush, that it was the attack that was causing that. Like, I thought he was attacking me twice because I was attacking him, but it was only because I was still crouched after the time he didn't want me to be crouching. So, that attack is pretty fucking weird. And it's not the most dangerous of the Grim Reaper's attacks. The most dangerous of the attacks is when he throws the scythe and summons the tiny scythes, but it's definitely the strangest one. And it took me the longest to actually figure out how it worked. I actually only learned that it works like that yesterday. Because normally when I record these commentaries, I'm a comfortable distance ahead of the games that I'm talking about, but not in this case. Dawn of Sorrow took me a fucking long time to finish. Because I had to play through Julius mode, and Julius mode has 3 playable characters, and I guess I didn't have to play through Julius mode with all 3 of them, but I did. Which tacked some time onto it. And then I did the boss rush on a couple of the Julius characters, which did also tack some time on. Oh well. This is a weird fucking part of the game. But this is what I mean, like, they established that there are demons out there, right? So there are demons that exist independent of Dracula. Like, there's a primal evil force, so why not... I don't know. And as far as making a sequel to Aria of Sorrow, I mean, let me give myself a new challenge. Let's say that Aria of Sorrow already exists and they decide they want to make a sequel to it. Honestly, and I think I said this at the very beginning of the commentary, if you're going to set your game in 2035, like, lean into that. You know what I mean? Like, why not, instead of contriving it so that this evil cult creates an environment that looks exactly like Castlevania, why not have monsters fucking invading Tokyo? Right? How about you have to go through fucking, like, skyscrapers or, like, modern environments that have been affected by this, like, supernatural evil? Doesn't that make sense? I realize that in this universe they're constructing, the existence of monsters and demons and evil magic is supposed to be secret, but I don't really buy that. I mean, did you see what the fuck happened at the start of the game? That Celia lady teleported into the middle of a city and, like, summoned a skeleton and then a giant rock monster. I think any pretenses of secrecy are out the window at that point. Like, the world knows. Somebody else saw that happen besides Soma and Mina and Genya. So, you could just cut that out completely and have them invade, like, a city. I mean, why not? Right? And I'm not necessarily in favor of doing things that are different just for the sake of being different, but I do think that in this case, there's this element of Aria of Sorrow and Dawn of Sorrow that goes completely unused, which is the modern setting, and I think it would be cool to incorporate that more directly. I also think that... Fuck. There's something I kind of want to say, but I feel like maybe I shouldn't say it. Oh, this is... Okay, good. I have a reason not to say it. So I have to talk about this boss fight coming up here. This is Abaddon. Abaddon is the hardest boss in the whole game. Abaddon is one of the most remarkable bosses I've actually ever seen in the video game. He has these... So he's a big bug with a conductor's baton, and he summons other bugs. And... So the reason that I'm getting fucked up by this guy is because I basically got trolled. Like, somebody somewhere said that you could use the Persephone soul to vacuum up all the bugs to get healed instead of... Yeah, thank you. To get healed instead of instead of taking damage from them. But as you can obviously see, this is like misinformation. What I normally do when I fight this guy is I have the Malachi Soul, which summons like a big ball of energy that destroys demolishes the locusts, and it's not a problem at all. But it didn't nat drop, and I refused to farm it again. So I just took what I had, which was the Persephone Soul, and I thought that it would work like the way the Malachi Soul worked, but not really. You do still have to react to the attacks if you want to use the Persephone Soul. You can't like literally just stand there and tank it and expect the vacuum to destroy all of them. But I didn't understand that at the time, and that fight was the result. I made a video about the Maxime fight. I could probably make a whole video about the Abaddon fight, but I'm not going to do that because the reason I made the Maxime fight video is because of my actual Harmony of Dissonance footage. I felt like what I had recorded didn't really convey what the experience of fighting Maxime is actually like. By contrast, I have plenty of Abaddon footage that I'm going to be uploading, and I think that will express more accurately the realities of fighting that guy, because that fight is like brutal. That fight is brutal and interesting, and the only complaints I have about it are that there are some random elements that can create the situations where it's not literally random, like paranoia, where the mirrors will just like kind of do whatever. It's random in the sense that the fact that his behavior is unpredictable will make it impossible to make intelligent decisions. Because Abaddon jumps, right? And he'll do like short jumps and long jumps, and which of the two he does, you don't know which one he's going to do until he's doing it. So you can be put in situations where, because you don't know what he's going to do, you can't like anticipate it properly. Like, let's say that you're up against a wall and he's jumping towards you. If you try to jump over him, he could do a long jump and hit you in midair. But if you just sit there and wait for the long jump to try to slide kick under it, he could just keep doing short jumps and eventually jump right into you. So that's what I mean when I say impossible to make intelligent decisions. I mean, it's hard. You can't make the right choice based on the sets of circumstances that the game is giving you, and that really becomes more of a problem that was more of a problem for me in my boss rush attempts. So here's the last boss room. Looks like Legion has been here. Oh shit. She's getting crucified like Jesus Christ. The fact that she, like, I was wondering what would happen to her at the end. The fact that she, like, teleports, because, like, she doesn't explode, she just kind of, like, disappears. But I guess she screamed, so. Oh, I guess they had to explain why. I don't know what that means. I think they're trying to explain how Alucard loses to this guy, because I think they didn't want to say, like, Dimitri just beats him. They were very careful about not upstaging Alucard or Julius. Julius has to use his power to break the barrier. Alucard loses because the dude pulled some weird shit with a human sacrifice. Interesting. So I guess this guy has Dracula powers, but if he gets too much Dracula power, he can't handle it. I guess like Dario earlier. Which does kind of defang these guys as threats. I said earlier that establishing the idea that there's all these like Dark Lord candidates who are running around with Dracula powers would be holy shit, would be a good way to create a constant source of villains in a theoretical longer multimedia series, but if they can't go too powerful without exploding, then that kind of defangs them as a threat. So here's the final boss of Dawn of Sorrow. 2 phases. Phase 1 is very easy. It's kind of like a very slow-paced Rondo-style boss where he'll do 3 different things, and each of the 3 things he does has a correct solution that's pretty easy to execute. This is kind of just a warm-up to make sure that you're watching the screen and you're paying attention until you get to Phase 2. And Phase 2 is when things really become a problem. So Phase 2 has 2 parts. You hit the face on the knee, and then you hit the face up near the head. And while he's stomping around like this, he's summoning the Langoliers, the little things with the three mouths. And if you're wondering why I call them the Langoliers, it's because that's what they look like. What's tricky is respecting his steps here, because he can and will. He was really nice to me here, but he can sometimes just keep walking forward until you're up against the wall. And what you're supposed to do is like duck underneath his leg at a certain point, or like duck underneath his foot. Like, you can't keep backing up forever. At a certain point, if he keeps walking forward, he can get you up against a wall and you have to change up your behavior. But there, he was relatively merciful, and this is where the Abaddon Soul really comes in handy. The Abaddon Soul is good. It's not good at hitting the weak spot, because the weak spot will become protected every time you do damage, no matter what that amount of damage is. So obviously, triggering his temporary invulnerability with 46 damage from Abaddon is not as good as triggering it with 175 damage from Reclaimed Soulless Swing. But what the Abaddon does that's so important is that it keeps the Langoliers away, and it maintains consistent damage even when you're not literally up in the guy's face. Because those Langoliers do like 130 or something. I mean, they do a lot of damage. Everything in this fight does a lot of damage, and because they're so unpredictable, yeah, because they do that like hesitate and then lunge, and it's very tricky, then it can be it's very easy to get hit by them. And then the rest of the fight is pretty much just an understanding what his two different attacks means, what his two different attack telegraphs mean, when he's hitting you with what fist, and then managing the Langoliers. So, pretty interesting boss, pretty frustrating when I first got to him, because of because like if he just walks forward, then the fight gets a lot harder, but I got an easy one there. Which is why I was able to no damage it, because he never really tested me that hard. I think I was playing more cautiously at the end there, because like once I got through the knee phase without taking any damage, I was like, oh shit, I can actually like no damage this for the fucking YouTube footage. And then I started playing like super cautiously for the second half because I didn't want to take any damage. That's an excellent question. I would also like to know the answer to that. So it's Satan? I thought the giant chicken from Dracula's Curse was Satan, and Dracula was just like a dude who took some of Satan's powers. So I guess there's a difference between the Dark Lord and the thing that you fight at the end of... Well, I guess the thing you fight at the end of Aryosara is more like a manifestation of primordial forces, whereas the Dark Lord is like an entity. So if Soma gets... I guess if Soma gets too pissed... Like, if Soma gets mugged when he's like 35 in Tokyo, if he gets attacked by Yakuza gang members, does he just like... I think I already said this, didn't I? I think I did. I think then he starts throwing fireballs, but if he gets super pissed, like if he, you know... if he loses all his money in the stock market, then he'll go crazy and become Dracula. See, if Genya was part of an actual clandestine organization, he'd probably just shoot Soma in the head. I feel like that's how a real secret agency would treat someone like this. Hammer expresses his one character trait. Let's give it up for Hammer, everybody. Ha 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 ha. I always wondered if this line is supposed to, like, foreshadow Alucard becoming evil, but I'm glad that they never got the chance to do that. I'm glad that this, whatever their Dawn of Sorrow expanded universe idea is pretty much ended here. Because I think having Alucard become evil after Symphony of the Night would be kind of a kick in the teeth. The whole point of that game, any game that tries to follow up on things that happen in Symphony of the Night is, I think, kind of a bad idea. So Aria of Sorrow and Dawn of Sorrow kind of mix elements of both of those things. So that's Dawn of Sorrow. A very frustrating game, a very sad game. I feel more bad about this game than I do for Circle of the Moon, because Circle of the Moon was also a mixture of interesting concepts and very, very bad gameplay. Dawn of Sorrow is a mix, is kind of like that too, but the things about Dawn of Sorrow that are good are better than the things about Circle of the Moon that are good, in my opinion. I mean, the game looks great, it sounds great, it plays great. Once you have the tools that you actually want, once you don't have to farm anymore, then playing the game is really fun. And like I said, Julius mode is excellent, and I'm going to probably commentate. I will commentate at least one piece of Julius mode footage. I don't quite know what I'm going to do yet with that, because I mostly want to talk about the boss fights, so maybe I'll just commentate a boss rush, but I don't know. I don't know, because I still feel like there are things about this game that I actually didn't get to, even though I did talk so much about it. So yes, as I said, I have more Dawn of Sorrow footage, Julius mode footage, boss rush footage. It's going to take me a while to get it all up, maybe more than a week. We'll see. But that's good, because it'll buy me time to start on Portrait of Ruin and actually get a head start again. Would I recommend this game? You know what? Play New Game. Yeah, just farm whatever you want at the start, and then like New Game Plus if you ever want to play it again. Or just like unlock Julius mode and have fun with that. So there it is. That's the end of the road. Hope you guys enjoyed. Everybody hang in there. And keep on Earth rocking.